Hi there, my name is Kathleen and I'm an acupuncturist at AcuBalance Wellness Center here in Vancouver, British Columbia. And in honor of the UN World Wellness Weekend, a bunch of us practitioners from here at AcuBalance we've prepared some talks for you. And so I hope that you find these useful. And when you're done with mine, go ahead and check out the other practitioners and see what they have to say. So when we started talking about what I wanted to talk about today, I felt really drawn to talk about something that I think every woman who's on the fertility journey, this is something that they struggle with. And yet we don't really acknowledge or make space for this. And what I'm talking about is really the emotional part of the fertility journey and how stress can affect fertility. And really what's the story underneath the story around fertility. So it's hard because the way that our medicine is really structured nowadays is that let's correct or fix the thing that is broken. And yet this doesn't seem to work all that much in the fertility journey, because if this were true, then IVF would work 100% of the time. But this is not what I see in clinical practice. So what is common in my clinical practice is that I tend to see a lot of women who identify as having a bit of a type A personality. And this is not a bad thing, because really having a type A personality has gotten you to a place where you've had some major accomplishments under your belt. You know, you're really good at coming up with the to-do list and checking everything on that to-do list off. And, you know, this has sort of been how you have organized and navigated your life. And the fertility journey is so difficult because you can go to a healthcare practitioner and they'll give you a list of A through Z, and you can finish everything off that list, and still, you know, your reproductive endocrinologist is going to say, oh, you have unexplained fertility. And this is such a frustrating diagnosis, because at least if there was something that we could correct, we can at least work on that thing. It's so hard when it comes to unexplained fertility. And these are the people, I'm sure you've heard this, whether it's in your community or with your friend group, but a lot of people will tell these people like, hey, don't stress, it's going to happen eventually. Or, you know, the second you stop trying, it's going to happen. This is such a frustrating thing to hear as somebody who needs to actually like put things into action. And so to hear like you just need to not do anything is such a frustrating thing, right? So that's really what I want to talk about, is how does stress affect the body, and what's really the thing that you are maybe not doing. So the bad news is that these people, to a certain extent, they're right. And so the place that they're right is that on a physiological level, our body responds to stress in a particular way. So our nervous system is wired in two different modes. It's in what I call the fight, flight, or freeze mode, which is called the sympathetic part of our nervous system, or it's in the feed and breed mode, which I call the parasympathetic part of our nervous system. And what happened is that through the course of evolution, as humans, we were evolving from our ancestors who were running away from bears, for example. And so what happens when you're running away from a bear is your body kicks you into that fight or flight or freeze mode, that sympathetic mode. And our body then starts to take that signal and say, okay, so I need to organize myself. So what it's going to do is it's going to send a lot of blood circulation and energy up to the brain, because you might need to problem solve through this problem of running away from a bear. And it's also going to send a lot of blood circulation and energy to the heart and lungs, because it's really just priming itself for action. Now, the sympathetic part of our nervous system is not a bad thing, but the problem happens when we are under chronic and prolonged stress. And so because our nervous system is so simple, it really doesn't understand the difference between I'm running away from a bear and I am having trouble getting pregnant. And then compound that with any given length of time, several months up to several years. And that's going to have an effect on the blood circulation, just on a physiological level, right? On the flip side, when you're in that parasympathetic mode, that feed and breed mode, what happens is that your body then organizes and says, okay, so I'm going to send a lot of blood circulation down to my digestive system, and then I'm also going to send a lot of blood circulation down to my reproductive organs. And so then the body's able to send blood, which is what I consider to be the messenger of the body. So the blood is the carrier of nutrition and oxygen and water and all these nice juicy things that our follicles, our growing follicles need to be bathed in to live in this environment as it's growing up into an egg. And then that is what is going to contribute to egg quality. And so this is why stress is so detrimental when it comes to the fertility. But it's not really helpful to say to somebody, like, don't stress, it's just going to happen, right? Like, that's not really a helpful thing, because it's missing out on a huge part of the journey, which is surrender and trust. And so a lot of times when we have to control all the little minute pieces, it's because we are not able to sink into surrendering and trusting that our bodies can do this work. It's about not being able to sink into trusting that this is the way that our path is supposed to align. A lot of times we will armor up around surrendering because it feels safer when we don't allow ourselves to hope. And this is the space, I think, that I love working with patients, because this is the juicy place where a lot of learning can happen and a lot of unfolding and a lot of healing of not just your story, but perhaps your family line story. And when we do this, we're able to create an environment where we are the best parents that we can possibly be to the next generation. So really what this is it's a struggle between what we call yin and yang in Chinese medicine. And so we all have a balance of yin and yang in our personality. And so the yang parts of ourselves is that type A, that doer, the organizer, the fixer, the one who's just got all their stuff together. And the yang part is really important because it is really good at narrowing, at focusing. So it's sort of like that sympathetic part of our nervous system, right? And then that yin part is when we're able to relax, and that's when we engage into that parasympathetic, that rest and digest part of our nervous system, that feed and breed. And what happens when we sink into that part of our personality is we are able to release control a little bit. We're able to invoke a sense of creativity. We're able to sink into the chaos that's happening right now and be okay with it and be able to flow with it instead of trying to contain it and trying to force things into happening. And so I wanted to share a case study with you. I had a patient a few years ago, and her name is Marie, and when she came to see me, she was in her late 30s, and she was a TV producer, very successful, worked on some movies and TV shows that even I've heard the name of. I'm not really a TV movie kind of a gal, but I recognize some of these movies, right? And she was working 60 to 70 hour weeks and had been doing that since her, like late teens, early 20s when she entered the movie industry. And, she waited to find the right man and really didn't want to start a family until she felt like all her ducks were in a row. So she wanted to feel financially stable, and she wanted to make sure that she had a house and had the right guy. And finally she created this really lovely environment to make a family in. And when she went to her reproductive endocrinologist here in Vancouver, they took her AMH, and she had a 0.04 AMH. It's really, really low. And especially for somebody in her late 30s, that was quite, quite low. And her doctor essentially told her, like, IVF is not even an option for you. Like, we can, they actually sent her to AccuBalance because they said, you're going to get the most out of doing some lifestyle changes. So when she came to see me, she was ready to do all the things, right? And so that's the sort of area that we worked on. We did some acupuncture, we did some laser, but really we worked on reducing her stress in her life. And part of that was bringing her work-life balance back into a more healthy place. And then really, she had spent so much time identifying as her career. And so she needed to do some work around sinking into what it would be like to be a mother and really shifting that identity before the baby was going to come. And so I share this story because I think that in the fertility journey, we have a tendency to forget about the heart, which can make us feel really broken and perhaps disconnected. And I think part of the work that I like to do is that I like to remind you that this is not just a process in which we go in and we tinker with your ovaries and with your uterus. This is a much deeper process, right? And through this process, all sorts of feelings are going to come up, and all those feelings are valid and true and valuable, actually. And so in the case of Marie, what we had to do is we had to bring that yin-yang back into balance, because she had lived so much of her life in that yang part where she was narrowly focused on her career, and then she was narrowly focused on finding her husband, and then she was narrowly focused on making a baby. And we had to expand that. We had to allow her the space to be more in her yin, to be more in that creative, that receptive space. So another story that I'd like to share with you is a woman named Rosita, and she has been through one of the most difficult fertility journeys that I have. Her story is one of the most difficult that I've had the chance to honor and to listen to. And by the time she came to see me, she was 44 years old. And before she started seeking treatment with acupuncture, she had done 3 rounds of IUI with Clomid with no pregnancies. She had had 1 IVF round with her own eggs. And she had a transfer, and it went really, really beautifully. And then unfortunately, at 11 weeks, when you're able to do the genetic testing, the NIPS testing, and they sent off her blood work, and they came back, and there was a chromosomal anomaly. And so she had to terminate the pregnancy. And they decided that, she's not getting, she and her partner decided that she's not getting any younger, and so let's just move forward with egg donors. And so over the course of 3 years, she had 2 different egg donors. So these are both, they're going to be 2 women who were in their early 20s with healthy, vibrant eggs. Both of the egg donors have had proven pregnancies before. And she had 4 transfers with these 2 different egg donors over 3 years. No pregnancies. And so then she, her reproductive endocrinologist decided, we're going to just pull out all the stops. They did intralipids, they did an ERA, which tests for uterine receptivity, and they decided that it was a uterine receptivity problem, even though the test came back as being normal. And so this is when I got a chance to meet Rosita. And she was about to go into her 5th IVF transfer with a 3rd egg donor. And so she came into the clinic, and the first thing off the bat I could tell was she was exhausted. She came in and she rattled off all the things that she was doing right, and this woman was doing all the things right. She had her exercise on point. She was eating super well. she and her husband were going through therapy just to make sure that, they were communicating well. She had all the right supplements, and really, there was not a single thing in her lifestyle that I could have coached her on shifting or changing. She had a meditation practice, and she also had a visualization practice. And so I asked her in this session, so what is your visualization practice like? And she's like, oh, I think about having a little baby lying between me and my husband. And I think about holding a baby when I stand in the mirror and really sink into like what it would feel like to be a mom holding an infant. And then I asked her, what does this baby mean to you? Because if I hear a story like this baby means so much more than just a baby. You don't push yourself through the marathon of fertility journeys, if this doesn't have some deeper roots. And she started crying, and she shared with me that, she really in her bones felt like she'd be such a good mother, and that she really wanted to raise somebody in the next generation who could contribute to the world on a bigger level. I thought this is a really beautiful place to touch into. And something that we work with in Chinese medicine is we work with a lot of acupuncture points that lay along meridians. And these meridians correspond to different organs on the body. And so with a lot of these, fertility points, a lot of these channels go up to the uterus, and they go to the ovaries, and there's a really beautiful hormone cascade that happens, and a lot of really lovely downstream effects that happen when we get acupuncture done. But a channel that I think that I work with on a daily basis with women is something called the Bao Mai. And the Bao Mai translates to the uterus meridian. And bao is the same bao that you would think of as a little dumpling, like when you go to the Chinese restaurant and you get little baos. And the difference with the Bao Mai, though, is that there is no points along this channel. And the only two places that it connects is it connects the heart and the uterus together. And because there are no points on this channel, I think of this as a sacred space in which only the patient has access to. And so when I see a lot of patients who have been through on difficult fertility journeys, what I see is that Bao Mai gets cut off. That connection between the heart and the uterus, that piece gets severed. And for a lot of patients, it's because it's a way to protect your heart, It's a way of saying, I can't get my hopes up too much, because if I do, then, what if I get disappointed? And so IVF cycle after IVF cycle, this connection gets just more and more cut off. And part of working with someone's story and working with healing the trauma that can come along with the fertility journey is making sure that connection between the Bao Mai and the heart, they're able to feel each other again. And so this is what I was trying to get at by asking her, what does this child mean to you? And, I started seeing that connection flow back through her tears. And so, I asked her, well, what about being a mother excites you? And Rosita told me, I'm terrified of having a baby. And she's like, it scares me when people hand me their babies so I can hold them, because really what I want is a toddler who I can, show the world, and we can talk about things, and we can, explore the world together. And that's the child that she was craving. And so we went back to her visualization practice, and we amended it, because that was what she needed to be focusing in on. So what she had done is she had protected her heart by asking for something that was close to what she wanted, but wasn't exactly what she wanted. And this is definitely a protective mechanism. And so that's what we worked on in our time leading up to her 5th and her final transfer. She had already decided before she came that this was going to be her last one, that if there was no baby after this one, that she was ready to just move on and move forward with her life. So we worked on her visualization practice, and we used the acupuncture to help move that energy along. And so she went forward with her 5th IVF, and I still get chills when I think about the email that she sent me, because she went in for her first blood test and it came back positive, and then she went in for her first ultrasound, and she sent me this email. She says, "I'm definitely pregnant, and guess what else? I'm pregnant with twins." And so this whole time that we had been talking about visualization and talking about this toddler that she's leading through the world, she had failed to mention that she was actually visualizing twins. And that is how powerful her manifestation was. So, again, the fertility journey is, we need the technology around IVF, and we need the technology when it comes to a lot of our journeys, but we can't forget about the meat of it, the juiciness, the why you're in this journey in the first place. And I hope that this talk helps remind you of that space, that this is something that's bigger than you, something that is maybe even bigger than you and the baby. And that if you can take away anything from this conversation, it's that I hope that you check in with your baomai, that you check in with your nervous system, that you're able to check in with that connection between your heart and the uterus. And so moving forward, a few things that I think that can support you is come in for acupuncture. Acupuncture is really, really great for regulating the nervous system on a physiological level, but many of my patients come and they feel like it's a safe space where we can sort of explore these things together. And your story may not be exactly like Rosita's story or Marie's story, but there's space in this treatment room for your story as well. And I think of acupuncture as being a conduit for your body's innate ability to heal. I never think of somebody who's on the fertility journey as being broken. I always think of it as, okay, so what's out of balance? And how can we support nourishing this body, nourishing this soil, nourishing this soul, so that a baby is welcome there? And yeah, so I would love to see you here. I'm here if you would like to ask any questions, and we do offer a 15-minute phone consultation. So if you're wanting to connect with somebody here at the clinic, please give us a call. Alrighty, thank you. Bye.